get started. How's everybody doing this morning? Welcome to SRE Live this Friday. I'm glad that it's Friday. I'm ready. I don't know, discouraging week. I didn't mention to you, Kevin, earlier, and the rest of the folks who joined. So I had the world's easiest sales transaction for my house. You know, we listed it on Friday, I think Friday before last, and then Saturday, 7 people came and had 2 offers just from Saturday, and then I didn't hear about them until Monday. But then on Monday, somebody else was wanting to come and see it real quick for it, and then so we had 3 offers within basically with 1 day of having it on the market. And so then we were off looking at houses, and now they backed out. So now we're back to square one. Now, fortunately, square one is hopefully not that bad of a place to be, being the first time we put it on the market, we sold it in a day. So I'm hoping, but that also means like this Saturday I get to look forward to having to run around while we'll get random calls from realtors and people coming to tour the house, and that's always fun. You sit at home for, you're at home, you're doing your thing, you've got, an hour, and then someone else comes, and then you have to go find something to do for 15 minutes while they look at the house. So, but, shouldn't complain. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about GraphQL today, and REST APIs, and look at a little bit of the difference. We talked about it just a little bit a couple weeks ago, and I am not an expert. I'm not here to teach you the advanced course on GraphQL here, but I'm having some fun playing with it. And one of the things we've been looking at is maybe converting some. We've talked about refactoring and updating some of our workflows. We're not going to do a comprehensive refactoring of the workflows right now, but we are going to look at some of the existing API calls that we use in our workflows, and compare and contrast a little bit. Let's look at the REST API version versus a GraphQL version. Maybe if we have time, I've been playing around with Gatsby a little bit lately, as talked about on a couple calls, the static site generator called Gatsby, which is made for really around React, JavaScript React. And one of the reasons why I wanted to dabble with Gatsby just for fun is because it really has this kind of forced reliance on GraphQL. So when you well, we'll look at that here rather than just speaking to it. Let me share some stuff, and that way you can see. I'm going to share my screen here. Now, that's right. I need to actually get Open Broadcaster installed so I can make a specific area of the screen that I share. Because now that I have this ultra widescreen monitor, I gotta remember, can't just share it. And where's Brave? Why am I not seeing the app I want to share in my? Here we are. There it is. Okay. Okay, so now let's look at some examples of what I'm talking about here. So, and I'm going to go to our GitHub site. I've got this. Oh, that's that one. Sorry, I thought I had this tab open. Give me a second, I'll get it all squared up here. So let's go for our GitHub version of our homepage here, which for your reference you can also link to under the learn more of the homepage. Let's go to the GitHub page, and then we'll take a look at so for all of the ModernApps.ninja sites now use Hugo as the static site generator, right? So it's going to take our markdown files that we create with the content and convert them to HTML files. And And so that's the job of the static site generator. And Gatsby does the same exact thing. Let's look at like in Hugo. If we look at how Hugo does that, we can say, so if we, let me actually, I should close the homepage. I want to look at the visual of this homepage here, right? So we can say there's a few types that we have up here, types like courses. And so if I click on categories, this homepage renders a tile for every course that's listed, right? And so in the directory structure, that looks like, if I go into courses, oops, that's this, I'm looking at my template there. 1 second, I'm gonna go to the content. So if I go in my content, English, courses, you can see, okay, here's all my, all the different courses. This renders a card for each one. It does one other check in that it looks in this front matter to make sure that it is not in draft status. So this is not in draft, so it's true. And if, as long as it's not in draft status, then it's going to take each of the courses that's listed here, and it's going to create a page that has all of these listed. And so we can see that page there, right? And how it does that is he has a template. And so inside of Hugo's standard structure, all of our template stuff is under layouts. And I'll look at default here first. So there's a few different files that help to create these pages. The key ones are actually going to be list and single. And so let's just look at an example from courses. So we've got our list and our single templates. Now what that means is for courses, there's two different templates. This is our list, right? So there's an HTML template, or really a Hugo template, right? That that defines that a list is where we take all these files that are in this directory and we tile them out in a list. And there's the HTML template right there that defines that. And then if I click on an individual thing, then we can see there's a template for the individuals, and that's what the single is. And that's very standard Hugo syntax, right? Whenever you go into any Hugo implementation, you'll see this. And if I wanted to, create a new content type here, whatever else, something other like courses, but another type of menu item where we display, then I could use go through and create a folder for it like this in the structure and add a list in HTML. And based on the where this falls, right? This list and this single.html are in a subdirectory of layouts called course. And because of the location that they're in, then Hugo knows to look for those files here. And in the event, you don't actually have to create those. You don't have to create custom templates for each type that you have. That's what the default is for. So if you have content types that, and you don't need it to be anything different from a standard. I think the default is based on the blog renderer. So you can see in this one, it's instead of being called a single, it's called post.html in the default, but nonetheless, it's the same thing. So let's see real quick, what does that look like? And this will give us a little compare and contrast between how it works with how you write a query for these pages. And so for this, when we go back to our list page here, list of all these courses, how does it get the list of courses, right? That's where we need some type of programming in order to query and determine what it is that we're going to display. And so Hugo has its own sort of a big part of what how this work is to have a structure, a well-defined structure for how that data is communicated and interacted with. And so we can look here in this template, and we'll go back into course, and we're going to see our list.html, and we can see here that this is our Hugo code right here that is going to say it's got, and a lot of these are using like standard keywords that are either from Golang or specific to Hugo, and Hugo's got really good documentation about this on the Hugo website, gohugo.io. They're using this type of construct to go in and determine what page is going to, it's going to use this essentially. So if we're going to look at our data model and we're going to look at data. So all the stuff gets in this object called data and dot pages. And then we look at our front matter and see if it's a type of course. So this is going to look at our data model. It's going to find all the things that are defined as pages, and then with a type of course. And so each of the header data, not the header, the top part of each of the files, it has that type, and it'll say defined as type course. And it also will fall back in the way Hugo processes it on the location. So things that are located in the course folder will also, there's something somewhere that in Hugo behavior that overwrites, like if you don't have it statically define your type, then it will fall back to use the location of the directory that the file is in to determine what type it is. And so in this case, we have it set here to paginate 50 pages, right? And I don't, it was interesting, what would happen if you have more than 50 pages? I don't know. But so in any case, Hugo gets the information like this from Hugo's way of doing things here, which is based on Golang, but has their own kind of enhancements, customization, library stuff. And that's where the difference with Gatsby, which is again a similar static site generator, but it uses GraphQL. And so we'll look at a couple Gatsby GraphQL calls. But first, let's start by starting with GitHub REST API and GraphQL. So we talked a little bit about GraphQL before. And this is the GitHub so GraphQL is a way to, it provides a syntax that allows you to get a little bit more granular and to do a little querying. And so you can do the things that you need to do to get a specific piece of data. Like a lot of times in your API call sequence, you may need to query the ID of something first, like and then you query and pull an object based on the ID, something like that, right? So whereas in REST, there may be multiple REST calls to derive the information and then abstract the information. With GraphQL, in many cases, you may get a simpler path to get to the data that you're ultimately trying to get at. And so it can be very useful that way. You can combine, you can go to different data sources within the underlying GraphQL API. Like with GitHub, GitHub has one GraphQL API, and it handles all operations through that common API. So it's underlying pretty broad grid of all the different components that are available in GitHub's overall API. I mean, it's kind of the things that you can find are pretty similar to GitHub's REST API, but you can do different things with it. And so, yeah, I'm still fairly new to it, but there's some interesting stuff that you can do with it. And there's definitely some possibilities of things that you can do with the GraphQL API that you can't do with the REST API. Like in the GitHub CLI, there's an option to transfer list tickets between different repositories. We use that for a couple things. When people initially register with the community, they submit an issue ticket with their registration data. And we don't want to leave that sitting there because it's their registration data. And so we take the issue ticket immediately and we transfer it to a different repository that's a private repository. And that way it's not sitting there on the main site for anybody to come and peruse easily. And I know that can only be done in the GraphQL query. So let's just dive into it further. I've got this kind of big query coming up here, but let's go back to a more basic query. So to start off with, GitHub has this Explorer, and generally having a integrated Explorer is a pretty standard attribute for sites with GraphQL APIs. So most of the time that if you're going to communicate with some site that has GraphQL APIs, or if you're going to build your own site, it'll probably, you'll probably see either this or an Apollo client, something that looks a lot like this, that is a graphical tool that helps you build GraphQL API queries. And so I'm going to duplicate this because I don't want to get rid of that query, but I do want to clear this one out. And so we can look at a couple things about this client. So when you look for, and let me put this link in the chat if anyone's interested in playing with Graphical here. So this particular client, so you'll hear me say GraphQL and Graphical. If you look here on this client right here, you can see that this user interface right here that we're looking at, or the client application is called Graph. There's a letter I in there, so this is called Graphical, and it is a visual interface tool for GraphQL. And so some of the cool things that we can do here with this, right, are we have this nice integrated Explorer. You can sign in and you don't have to worry about the sign in. Sorry, you don't have to worry about getting your token or things like that you may need if what you can do works within this this web browser based one that they have. Now, one thing about this Explorer I found is that there is no way in the Explorer to give yourself like a full token access. And so this is like permanently restricted to read in this. And so you can use it to help build your query, but there's a lot of queries that you actually can't test in the one that's built onto GitHub's web pages. You have to use you can go and do, from any type of programming language or from any shell script, you can do queries in, from text, from code, or from curls or what have you. Or there's also, you can download like one of the more popular clients is one called Apollo. You can also get I don't know if you can see this or not, because, but there is, I should reshare my desktop, but there is a Electron client, so it should work on all operating systems, that looks very similar to this, that you can download and run on your desktop, and you can do very similar things in it. But the one big advantage of the one that's built into GitHub's website is the Explorer. Like when I run this on my local version of Graphical, I don't get this Explorer functionality, and this Explorer is really nice because now when I want to go and figure out my queries, I can start with, I'm going to get rid of that. Query my query, and I can start to, let's see, look at things like I want to look at stuff that's in an organization. It helps if you've got some familiarity already with the structure of their REST API. I mean, that helps to some extent, because in general, if you go to GitHub's REST API documentation, yes, it has things that are organized in the organizations grouping or in the repositories grouping. And kind of from what I've seen so far, the location of data that you look is kind of a similar thing. So you can look for organization, and you can see here there's repositories, and it has a similar data placement in the schema in GraphQL. But I have been learning that GraphQL's, these get pretty complicated pretty quickly. Getting the call ready for this morning that we'll look at, was a little bit hairy. Okay, so we can go ahead and pick here. If I want to pick organization, and I'm going to put a login, and we'll say the organization ModernApps Ninja. And I wonder what it is say. That'll just run by itself. So if I just put in that, you can see here that I was able to get a response back, and it says my organization ID. And now if I want to go to, let's just go through and see, this is some of the words they use in here, and kind of the standards that you see in these schemas, they get a bit esoteric, but you see them, pretty quickly. And so I've got like repositories and repository in here. So it's most likely if I want to list multiple repositories, right, I'm going to go in that repositories. And let's just say, I want to see my first 10 repositories in the Modern Apps Learning org. Okay, and there we go. Now we have our, now I can see, okay, so I can see my first 10, but it's telling me the node and the ID value. And that's not very helpful for me as a human, because even if I'm writing a script that wants to make use of this information, it may be good enough to if I just want the first 10 and I don't care, and I'll get any other detail on a follow-on query, right, where I'm going to maybe use the ID value for all of them. Maybe I don't need any more information, but in this case, let's say I really want, some information that I can read, so I know what those are. So I can go down here and I can see in the individual nodes that populate, we should have a name value in here. So let's just see name. So I can click on that, and now I can see here that is giving me the name of each of these. Right. This is the name of each of the first 10 repos. And so while this can get the schema and the format for these queries can get pretty hairy. It's nice that it has this visual tool to help you build the queries. And you can go through and kind of comb through things and try to find what does and doesn't work. And that's, I think, really useful way of, now, in addition to the Explorer here, we also have, I'm gonna close that, docs. And so this is actually really cool because this actually will go to whatever, if you're using Graphical, in this case, I'm using the version on GitHub's website, but if you just get the Graphical client, it'll allow you to just paste in, the API, the GraphQL API of whichever site you want to, or you're surfing, and it'll actually go through and it'll upload the documentation for whatever site that is, or whatever API that is in this documentation explorer. So this is not a random documentation. It is exactly the GraphQL site that you're looking for, what is available on it, repository. And so this would be searching through the actual specific GitHub, and you can see it's pulling different things from the documentation for this API into this list here. And so we can go through here and look at all sorts of things, but it'll bring up the actual API documentation right here in the documentation explorer, and it also this little utility here. If you start typing queries in here, it has things like auto complete and stuff like that as well. So kind of a cool utility. And so that's how I do things for if we're trying to get a new GraphQL query figured out. You'll jump into this, you'll get your query filled out or identified, and then you will go into whatever your automation tool is, and just paste in the query essentially. I did find in curl you have to stringify this JSON here. I don't know. I mean, I made it proper JSON syntax to make the API call in curl myself. I went over it several times and feel confident that I was right in my exact spacing and syntaxing, but I couldn't get it to work until I ran it through a stringify tool. So you can go online and search for JSON stringify, or if you're doing it in JavaScript or something, you can use stringify, the standard JSON stringify function, and it will convert it, for the appropriate format that needed to make the call. So now let me go ahead and reshare my desktop. I'm going to stop the sharing, and I'm going to try to go widescreen here, and let's just look at some of this, making some of these calls. So let's share screen again. Oh, desktop 2. Now I know this is going to, is that, can I ask, does that make, is this too squished or too small for you? Does that display okay for you? I'm going to take that as a yes, but
Yeah, I'd say I'm going to give you a yes, Art.
awesome. Okay. If anybody has a hard time seeing anything, I know this, I've got this wide screen now, so it may not render very well. So I have a few different files that I've set up just in my VS Code browser as a reference. So we've got a couple of REST API calls here, just basic ones. And then we have a similar GraphQL API, and this will help us to like do a little compare and contrast. And so one of the first things I do is to get this file here. I'm not going to open it because it has some secrets in it, but I have a little init file that has a username and token just stored there, so I can source it, and then we'll have these values: gh user and token. And so one initial API call, I like to do a simple API call at first, just to make sure that it's working and I've got the variables set right. I probably don't have them set right, my guess, because they may have timed out. So I'll just source this init file just to make sure my variables get set right. And then I'll just copy this basic. This one's right, just a very basic command to gather. So what is this one going to do? So I'm going to do curl. We're going to include the headers. So this is the -i. We'll say when I get a response back from the curl, show me the headers too. I don't really want to see the headers right now, so we'll just get rid of that. And then this -u format allows me to enter my username token format. So this is one way of authenticating. I'm more often you'll see entering an authorization header like in this format in the second command, but you can also curl it with this -u by defining the username and the token here. So, but yeah, I created the variables there and I sourced them with that that command, and we're going to see. So we'll replace this with my username and my token. Now, I should actually mention token, right? If you need to talk to the GitHub API, the first step actually should be, let's see, plain. So you come here, come to your user profile, you go to settings, and then you go to developer settings, and we go to personal access tokens. And you can just go here to generate new token. I don't want to mess with mine right now because I've got it working and don't need to tip the demo gods. But yeah, so you'll generate a new token here. And once you go to this screen, it just gives you like a checklist of different features that you want someone with that token, which will only be you, right, to be able to do. And so you can give it just read only stuff. You can get it to write. You can allow it to change settings on your account or not. And as of course, typical best security practices, generating tokens that are limited in scope to just what you or the workflow needs to be doing. So I've got mine that I call super. Probably gives you a hint as to how not good it is of a security practice. But yeah, it's for me, I have it set up to just kind of give me access to everything here. And so once you have your personal access token, that is what we're using here in both the username, the curl /u, where we define the username, and also where we create this authorization header. In both cases, it's this personal access token that I'm using there. Okay, so now we can see I've already actually got this down here, but it was this one I still has the -i in it. So this will give us back our headers, but we can come back and let me move this more center here. Okay, let's see, what does this create here for us? So here's the curl, and this whole first part here is our headers because this one did have the -i on it. And so you can see we got a bunch of header information. If you're interested in looking at that, that's fine. If I do the same thing again, but take out the -i, we'll just only get the file back as opposed to the headers. So let's clean that up a little bit. Okay, and now we see we got a JSON file back that, okay, what was it? So we got here, we did our curl, and now we have our JSON file back, and this says Modern Apps Ninja ID. Now, what did we ask for? Oops. Sorry about that. We asked for the scrolling on this thing. It is, I need to make this like a longer or something. Just keep scrolling back and forth. Okay. So we asked for, we just made a plain call here to the API, GitHub orgs Modern Apps Ninja. We didn't have anything additional specified here. So it's just going to come back and give us the basic information that it has on file for Modern Apps Ninja org. So we can see, we can find things like login, ID, and you can make some changes here to, if we want to say users, for example. So orgs are also users, interestingly enough, right? So I can find information about users as well. In this case, it's kind of, when you think about the schema, orgs kind of have to be users, because if you go to github.com/your username or github.com/modernapps, you see schematically an organization is in the same namespace that a user would be. And so organizations also fit in as users. And so there I create but if I want to change this to learn about my user account, right, I could just say fuel, and then I'm going to get the information back from GitHub about my user account, and it returns it as a standard JSON object. And so like a couple things you see that, you see that this is a relatively specific piece of information, right? It is, specific to me, right? But it isn't, if I just wanted just the login value, which generally oftentimes you do, you pull down this information and you're getting all this lines of stuff, and it's really just for login value. And so that's one thing that, people talk about as a positive for GraphQL as opposed to REST API is out of the box. GraphQL can look at a schema and you can just inherently ask it, I just want the login value, and it'll just send you back the login value. So it doesn't have to give you everything else that's in the object, whether that matters as much. And certainly, yeah, the point being that sometimes it's a nice thing, sometimes it's not. It really depends on what you're trying to do, whether that the GraphQL method or the benefit of being able to get a little more granular in some of these things is worth it. So there's our basic REST API call, and we can expand this just a little bit. Now let's go back into looking at the next API call that we'll do here. So this next one is to pull a file from a repository. So let's work at where we got this from. So this one came from, where did it come from? Had the window open. And here it is. Okay, so here we are on the Intro to Tanzu portfolio course here in this browser. And let me expand this a little bit. Maybe if I can make the text a little bigger. Okay, so here at Intro to Tanzu portfolio, and in every one of these courses, our workflows are in the .github directory, and we're using GitHub Actions workflows here. And I just started here right at the very top, course user registration event. The first thing it does is verify a membership job. And then the first API call that I saw here, right, is this one here, where it says we're going to curl the member record file. And so we go through here, we are curling it. And then once we do, the only thing we're going to do is get the name, extract the name value. So we can say we curl this member record. It's a record just like the one we're actually it's not a member record. It's a file that. So this is a file that gets created when someone enrolls with the community. There's a repo called admin private that everyone has access to. That's a member of the community. And and it has a file that is in this format of GitHub event, your username and your GitHub ID .yaml, and that has just the information that you put in when you open the initial issue ticket to create an account. It's also posted on your publicly on your member page that gets created as well. Nothing that's secret in this at all. Okay, and so we so we get that file, and then inside of that file it has a name value, and so we go through and we get the name, and then we check to basically to see if it exists, because if you're a member, if you're a member, you should have a file with your username and ID in this format in this directory. Every member, so as part of that initial, when you sign up with the community, this file gets created. And yeah, and so it should be there for every member. So this checks to see if it's there. It checks the name. It does a little sanity check to see if to make sure that that the name matches the name of the user who executed the action as well. So a little sanity check, making sure that the person who is registering for this course is a member. And so yeah, so we pull that over into here, API call to pull a file from a directory. It's fairly straightforward. So we go authorization token, and then we look where this is at, and we can tell from the API that this is under repositories. And so, it's good to be familiar with the API documentation. So because sometimes you want things that are under the organization's API. Some information about repositories is under the organization's API. Like if you want to list which repositories are part of an organization, then you'll go to the organization's API. And there may be a logic to it, because it's gotten to feel fairly intuitive for me, because I've done enough of these API calls with the GitHub API to where I generally have a good indication whether I'm going to look in the organization's API or looking in repositories or what have you, to find out where do I go to find the information I want. But you definitely want to play with the GitHub REST API documentation if you're making the REST calls. I thought I had this open, but you know how that is. We've got too many tabs. So let's just look this up. Sorry, the presentation's a little bit disorganized. Okay, so yeah, we've got our GitHub REST API, right? And we can go down here into our reference, and then we can see if I want to look, from that repositories, and I have my organizations, and we can start to see here now. Getting a file, we can see that it comes from the repositories. So let's just look this up. So we go to repositories. And we can start to see here, what is it that you're allowed to do in the repositories API. So get org repo, and we can see here a list of different stuff that you can do, and you can go in here and let's see, where's the one for getting a file. Another thing that also works well on for finding the API documentation for your the REST call that you want to make is just Google searching it, right? What's the GitHub API call to pull down a file, and it'll help you get the right syntax for this. But it's very simple syntax, right? In this case, they're really just if we go to the repos and have the right path, then and do standard curl with, then we didn't, as you can see, we didn't have to put a bunch of different headers. We didn't have to do anything crazy. Very simple. To just grab this file. Oops, what did I just do? So now let's just grab the file and see what we can get. And actually, I want to make sure I delete, because I did this already yesterday. So let me just delete that from my local directory, so we can see here that I don't already have it. So we're going to remove, this one creates that file we can see called raw member record curl. So we want to delete that. And I'm also going to delete the one for Graphql because we're going to pull that down again. So let's go ahead and we'll take this and just paste it in, see what happens. Right, and now I can ls and see that we have this raw member record curl, and I can go through and this is cat raw member record curl, and what do I have? I've got same output essentially that we saw before. So now we can see, yeah, I've got the curl from this. And with that didn't pull down the file. That's giving me, what am I doing wrong here? So this gives me the type file. That's not what I wanted. What did I do wrong? Let's see. So there must be something in this workflow over here that is giving me the metadata, but I wanted the actual file. What am I to look at wrong here? 1 second as we dig into what this was. Way too many tabs open. Okay, so let's do this again. So we're going to curl member record file. And we've got, okay, and I call this raw member record curl. And what I have now is the metadata about the file, but I wanted the actual file. I could have sworn this was working yesterday. But or you know what, actually this is what I get from the, you know, that's funny. I thought this was playing the actual member record file, but it's not. Okay, it doesn't need to. It never was to begin with. I just misread when I went to pull up the example, I misread the example. So yeah, I'm actually just getting the metadata about the file here, because the main thing I'm trying to do is verify if somebody is a member. So I don't actually have to look into the file. I just need to see if the file exists. Yeah, so actually, so this call is really just coming down to get the metadata from the file. And so because if there is no file, it's not going to return a name, right? And so when I go back to that workflow logic and we go to this next step and we say, you know, set this environmental variable for the name and extract the name from that file metadata, this will be blank, right? And so assuming that somebody's not a record, just so that if you follow the rest of the logic, it'll go through and verify that they are or aren't a member based on whether or not there is a name for this file. Now, that's kind of a peculiar way to verify membership. I don't know, you know, I don't know why I did it at the time, because there is a organization members API, and you can go and query if somebody's a member of a team or what have you. But nonetheless, you know, when I put this together, it got the job done. If I were to do it again, I probably would query the member API and rather than you know, calling for the presence of that file. But nonetheless, it gets the job done, and nobody would have this file there unless they were a member. So we see with the rest, that's how we got the information about the file. Now let's go over and let's look at how to convert these things that we saw in our graphical. And when we want to run it as a from curl or from another text-based code or what have you, it should look something like this, right? So we take that query and we just stringify it down into a single string, and let's put it in a standard curl command. And now, much like the other format, we have this very basic one. This example just tells you who's logged in based on this token value, and so it is straight out of the GitHub GraphQL documentation. So if we want to put that in there in base, now this again is dependent on having that token variable set up. So if you want to do this locally, make sure you either replace the token, either the token variable with your actual token, or you can you know, create the variable. So we can see here, it returned to me very specific piece of information. It was very short and succinct. So I just got the login value. And so, yeah, so you can see, rather than getting all the information about the current user, Now, if I were to go through and take out, let's try this on the fly here. Let's take out the word login and just say I just want to see viewer. I don't know what happens. I haven't tried this, but let's give it a try. I think it should return in a bit more information, but it may not. So let's see, what does this say? Selection mismatch, viewer locations field must have, so maybe if I put ... let's say viewer. So I need something here. So I did, that's one of the nice reasons of using the graphical to test out your query before you come into the command line. But I am curious what will happen if I do that. So I did not like not having a login specified there. It wanted, yep. So in order to get more specific information, like you have to like make sure that you put your queries and the filters in the right places to filter. So in this case, you have to specify some value based on this one. But you know, if you go in and get these queries and check them in your graphical, then you know, it'll be good. I mean, it will work out for you. If it works there, then you can identify the structure more easily, get the structure down, and then paste it back into here. And that's how I got this next one, which I was actually in this one, I don't know, maybe it was late in the evening, trying to get the actual file data itself, which is actually pretty easy to do in the REST API. Easier. It took me a while to build this query. I had to do a bunch of Google searching, and even after doing the Google searching, I had to do more searching and searching. And then so you end up in this kind of very peculiar expression here. So let's look at what, you know, this expression in the graphical tree. Actually, it's a little bit easier to do it in the Explorer here. So yeah, so this one is saying, look in this repository, and we're going to query what repository that we want. And we actually can see here, if we go down the Explorer, that when we click on a repository, it's going to have a couple default and required values, name and owner. And then if I want to scroll down further, what am I looking for in my repository? I'm looking for an object. So you go down our alphabetical list. We could say our object. Now, what object are we looking for, right? And this is where the expression comes in. And this is a get revision statement, a get revision expression. So you can do like head, commit numbers, and you can look up different expressions that on the Git documentation. There's some documentation for what are valid, you know, expression statements. But you can be very specific, like a specific commit ID, things like that. In this expression. In this case, I'm going to use the location, right? I'm going to say I'm on my main branch, and the location of the file that I want is just, I have it specified to this specific file. And then we go down a little bit further. And what do I want? What do I want from the object that meets this expression? I can look on the tree. I can look at tags. I can look at commits. In this case, I want the blob. And I want the text. And so when I run this, you can see it returns back just my text, right? So there's a lot of information, you know, available for this. Now I could also go through and I can get additional information about this. As you can see here, I was very specific in this case, right? I could pull out the name and get a list of all of the files in the directory. But in that case, I just have a list of just text. If I wasn't looking for a very specific file, I'd also want to make sure that I have the names of the objects and stuff. So I can go through and I can add those. I think actually I already have a little bit more, a slightly different one here loaded in my local graphical client. Now, this is the local graphical client. It does nicely have the this little documentation search window, but what it doesn't have is the schema explorer. So either you have to know what you want, or you can go through the docs. Like I said, for whatever endpoint that you put in here, it will go through it. It'll find the corresponding docs for that API. And so you can dynamically search in the integrated docs explorer to find information about your specific API. But it is really nice that most of these sites that are using graphical APIs and provide a graphical API or GraphQL API, they will have either graphical or Apollo client in the web browser, much like GitHub does. And the ones I've seen that are hosted on the site that you're going, they seem to have this explorer. And that includes if you like spin up your own, like if you spin up a basic Gatsby project, it will give you a page just like what GitHub has here, where you have your own graphical and your own your client and your own explorer and so on to help anyone who's using your API to get access to the GraphQL. And so when we look at this query here, this query is looking at repositories. It's going to filter the repositories by owner and name, right? And with owners is going to be your org, right? And name is going to be the name of the repository. And then we're going to say we're going to look at all the files that are in this directory. So it starts with root. And if we actually go to this repo on GitHub, you'll see that this is from root. You go to the user data folder and then you go to the members folder. So it's just saying root. We're going to look in this members folder to see all the files that represent. And what do I want? I want a name, a type, a mode, whatever the mode is. And I want, give me the byte size, the text is the binary. And so it gets me information from the tree metadata, and it gets me the information from the object all in one common query. So these some of the information that I'm going to request here is from sort of two separate but related queries. It's kind of interesting that you can, from two different parent objects on the tree view of the data. So we'll see what that response looks like here, right? And this is going to go through and it's going to get all the files. And for each of the files here, what does it have? So we see data, repository, object, entries, name, type, mode, object, byte size, text. So you can see here that this is the data about the object itself is a child of the entry. So for entries, we have metadata, right? These entries, this is metadata that we have about the files. And then we go in the object, we're going a level deeper. We're going to get information from the specific files, right? So directory level information versus file level information. So we can see here, we've got that information. And again, if we don't want mode, we just delete mode, right? And if I go back and run it again, then it'll come back, but it won't have the mode information in it. It'll be just what I want. So if I and that's where we can see, like in this simpler one that I have here, you can see this is this is the same structure, but instead of pulling any file metadata, the only thing I'm going to pull is the text. And so if I just wanted to get the data from the file, right, then I can just get the data from the file. Alternatively, like I realized, right, I'm not actually looking for the data from the file. I'm just looking for the name from the file. So since I just want the name from the file, I can get rid of like blob. And I can go back to, I want tree, and then I want to have entries, and I want the name. I don't need to go through and get any more object data. Let's just say I just want the name. And so now I can see, I can go entries on tree and up. And what did I not do right? So there's something that it doesn't like about this. Let me look at my other one. So on tree, entries, name and type. So we see on trees. Oh, it's because in this one, I'm looking for the specific file. So if I get rid of the specific file here, and I just want to get the names of files, I think that should do the trick. Yep. So now I can see I've got a list of all the names of all the files that are in members, just very, very specifically. And so, yeah, it's a really nice thing is, like I said, if I was gathering this information from the REST API, I wouldn't just be getting the name out of the file. And the other flip side of this too is if you're hosting an API, you don't have to do anything to allow people to do this type of query. Like with REST, you can you could write code for your API that allows people to query your API in any number of ways, but then you have to maintain that code, right? Whereas if you have your data source, if you can get it represented in a GraphQL, and there's all types of automations to take existing data sources and represent them with a GraphQL API. And so in order to create one of these APIs in practice, it's actually, pretty simple to do because the automations, if you have a well-structured data source already, some type of SQL or even an unstructured database, you can have that use utilities and what have you to get it to where you've got GraphQL based APIs for that. And so I hope that was is a bit basic. I hope it wasn't a little bit, I hope it wasn't very scattered. I was trying to cover a lot of bases because I want to make this, interesting for people coming from a lot of different backgrounds. And so it's yeah, I think that that's part of the reason why I'm a little bit scattered in my presentation. I keep thinking, I want to make sure that I cover this or that for everybody, make sure everybody's included. So I hope that everybody was able to follow along fine and it wasn't too slow or too fast for everybody. But yeah, basic REST API calls. You can see a little bit one we're using right here. And if I want to convert that to a GraphQL API call, we can see last thing I didn't execute this. So this is going to pull the text down from that file. So we're actually looking for the name of the text, but in this case, we could kind of see that we got a parser. This was working last night. Why is it giving me a parser now? Oh, wait, I didn't. It gave it to me, right? No, it said. Oh, never mind. I saved the output in the member record curl.json. So if I want to see that output, let's say cat GraphQL member record curl.json, and now I can see here that it is. This is actually the text that is in that file. So it very succinctly returned back the text that's in that file. Now, then that works. That's actually pretty nice method to get text from a file. Reasonable. Now, one thing we didn't show is if the REST API call was actually one that was just pulling the file as opposed to the metadata. Like we saw that this gave us back a JSON object with the metadata, but there is also a very simple REST API call that will actually just pull down the file, right? And so I kind of think, with REST to get the file, it's a little bit easier, but in general for that other information gathering, whether I'm looking for the user's user login name or file name, some sort of metadata, it's really nice to be able to get exactly that information and not be returned a big long file with a whole bunch of other stuff. And so I think that's a little bit of a gist. Hopefully that gives if this gives you a little feel for the difference at a basic level. And I'm curious if there's any questions. If not, that'll probably be where we stop for the day. Okay. I guess
fine. Thanks. That was a good overview. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye, everybody.
Hey, Art,
Yes.
if kind of an unrelated question, if you have
Sure.
any more time.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And so I just signed up for the course last night, and I noticed a couple of issues, and I was having a hard time essentially submitting the issues. It seems like part of the it seems like there might be a bug in the submission of an issue process.
Okay.
And so, the first issue that I found, I was just doing the very first course, the ModernApps Skills 101, and on the taking tests page, there was there's a link to a page that doesn't exist, or it gets a 404, I should say. And so I went to, and again, I'm part of the reason I'm doing it is because I'm learning here. So if
that's exactly what it's for.
I might be doing something wrong, but my understanding was I was trying to hunt around and essentially figure out where that file might be. And I really don't find that it exists anymore at all. It was the how to take a test instructions link that was in a reference folder that doesn't seem to exist anymore.
Something
Okay.
must have changed. Let's see. I'm pulling this up as we
Sure.
speak here. So
Do you want a link or you
follow
got it?
along. I think I've got it here. So,
Okay.
and this is what the taking tests, or where we're at.
Yeah, on the taking tests page, that's right. And then
Additional
there's a section,
tests.
yeah, additional test instruction reference. And then please see how to take a test instructions.
Oh, not found.
Yeah.
It's good catch.
So
Yeah, 'cause there is a more thorough instruction somewhere. That's the question. Where did it go?
well, the thing that I was running into, and I assume it's in the more thorough, was how to answer question 3. Like your video does say it, but I was looking for the text to say it too, like the idea of comma separated and alphabetical order, were a couple of the points you made in your video. So then I went to, I didn't really know to edit that page didn't really seem like the right thing. Maybe it is in hindsight. Okay. But, to like report this. So instead I went and I found the section in GitHub where this exists. And I went to open an issue. And I went and I chose the option for bug report. And then, and I filled it all out and I submitted it, and then it was instantly closed. And it said that the verbiage said I was trying to modify a test page and that I had to be a maintainer or higher. And then it just closed my issue right away.
Let me see. Let's go ahead and submit an issue. Interesting. So I wonder, is there something? Because I just tried to open one and it let me open, but I'm of course am a maintainer, so it's not a valid test for me to try it. That's
Well, it let me open it, and then nearly immediately closed it with some verbiage that told me, that I needed to be a maintainer or contact a maintainer or something.
I see this. Let's see what it is.
I can share my screen with any of the messages.
Okay, so I see. Yeah, I see it now. So ModernApps NinjaBot responded, which means that the GitHub action, there's going to be a GitHub action run here that did something, and I bet you here that our GitHub action workflow is not because what is supposed to happen, right? Is if a issue ticket is opened with type of submit test answer key, then that should automatically process. But it should be filtering. I can share here so you can see what I'm saying here.
Well, and did you catch, just to be clear, that I chose the option for whatever, I think the first one, submit a bug request or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, bug report. Right.
I can see here, like if I go to issues, right, and I go to closed, I can see here what happened to yours. I can see that there it is, and there was a response by the bot.
That's right.
That tells me that that shouldn't have happened, because it should happen. So if we go back into our issues and we go, or not issues, let's go back to our code. We go .github, and we go workflows, and we want to see how do people register the pull request? Which one is the issue ticket handler? Submit test key. So we look at so yes, that is. Oh wait, here we go. So what we have here, right, is on issue types opened. The very first thing we do, job is verify membership, and this is supposed to check for the presence of a tag that says submit test key. This should not run on anything that doesn't say submit test key.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting that it did do any automated processing of this one. Why did this? Okay, so it did verify membership, but it didn't do the submit test key step, which because it shouldn't have. It shouldn't have actually. No, it shouldn't have verified membership, right? Because if we look at that code, it said that right at the beginning of the verify membership job, so it shouldn't have even ran the verify membership job because it didn't have the. That's peculiar because it did. So let's just go back here. Let's look at the code again. GitHub workflows. and submit test key. So the very first thing on job verify membership is if, and this is just the syntax that works, you know, who knows exactly why, right? But this is, yeah, and this has been a solid method for me. I haven't had any other problems, but it is peculiar. So submit test key, unless, so one thought could be, let me check an issue. Issues, now if we go to closed, we go back to look at this. Yeah, this doesn't have any labels. There's no labels at all here. And so there should be no way that it could have matched the condition. It must be anything that says submit an answer key. Why is it acting like that's an answer key? It's not. That one is definitely perplexing because I use this method on all the courses, and it should, you know, we have, I'm trying to wonder what is the condition in which that it would run. Well, let's see what the action run said. The action run came through, submit link to how to, so yeah, it definitely sees that as the submit test key and it ran it. But why did it run that? That's like a level beyond like what we can easily even tell in here, because usually if that in the past when I've seen when that condition is not met, it just doesn't run. Nothing runs. And now it's running. That's just sort of how GitHub Action works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that would be a fun one to troubleshoot. Well, I will. That one is going to be probably a little bit involved, and because that's not obvious. I don't know why it's behaving that way, but it makes me wonder. Fortunately, I do have accounts that aren't admins that don't have any particular privilege, so I'll be able to go in and test trying to open an issue ticket, because it seemed to let me open an issue ticket. I wonder, did it trigger an action when I opened? Yeah, so it did trigger an action when I. Yeah, so I did the same thing when I opened that issue ticket. Like I closed it myself, but it probably would have done the same thing to me. It probably would have done this auto close because it ran, and it's definitely not supposed to run. But I don't think that there's anything. I don't even know. I don't think there's anything in the output that says that condition gets met, because all the output is assuming the condition was already met. Like they should just not run at all. So yeah, I don't know. I'll have to dive into that one. That's kind of pretty interesting.
Feel free to reach out if you need some, you know, testing from the outside or something. I'm glad to help.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And was that the only question there? Was there another question?
That was it. Just, you know, that broken link and then the problem submitting the issue. Then those were the basic two things.
Cool. Maybe I will touch bases on what happens next week or something if I get that figured out.
Cool. All right. Very good. Thanks. Have a
Thanks
good
a lot.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Thanks, everyone.